Hey guys, you've heard of the Young Turks podcast because you're listening to it right now. But make sure that you subscribe and give it a 5-star rating if you like it. Thank you for listening.
Hello and welcome back to the Friday edition of the Young Turks. Eventually, perhaps, a power panel. For now, it's me, John, and Emma Vigeland's here.
Hi.
Good to have you here.
Great to be here.
We're gonna be closing out the week.
Great to have you here.
Now I feel uncomfortable. But I probably just matched the audience on that. So we've been doing the show throughout the week, having a lot of fun. And I started to say this is gonna close out the week, but of course is not, because on Saturday, we have South Carolina, the fourth of the first 4 primaries. And we're gonna be doing live coverage, of course. That is Saturday, February 29th for the Young Turks South Carolina primary coverage. I'll be here, Emma, Jayar, and Adrian Lawrence as well for live updates and analysis, with Cenk Uygur joining via Skype. Coverage begins at 7 p.m. Eastern time, 4 p.m. Pacific time at tyt.com/live. And there will be a period, as there always is, of members exclusive coverage that will begin at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific time. So the majority of it is for everyone. That last little bit where we finally start to tell the truth, that's just for members. So become a member and you'll be able to access that.
Awesome.
We got a ton to talk about, and you know what? I want to make sure that we have a lot of time for when Jayar joins us a little bit later on. So why don't we jump right into it?
Let's do it.
Yesterday, a whistleblower blew the whistle on a particularly egregious example of the Trump administration's lack of serious care and consideration when it comes to the coronavirus situation. A whistleblower filed a complaint alleging that at least a dozen federal workers did not have the necessary protective gear or training when they were deployed to help Americans evacuated from China during the coronavirus outbreak. This has been confirmed by NBC News. Quote, after a phone call with health agency leaders to raise their fears about exposure to the virus, staff members described a whitewashing of the situation, characterizing the response as corrupt and a cover-up. Now, thankfully, as in Ukraine, eventually, this whistleblower account has been released. We now have the details, and perhaps we'll find out more in the future. But we do have a little bit more knowledge that I want to get to before we jump into the commentary. The complaint deals with the Department of Health and Human Services employees sent to Travis and March Air Force bases in California earlier this month to assist quarantined evacuees. The complaint says that staffers were improperly deployed. They weren't properly trained or equipped to operate in a public health emergency situation. And adding to the whistleblower's concerns, staffers for the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention who were present were in full protective suits, according to the complaint. So, I mean, think about the coordination there, where there are people working with coronavirus infected individuals in like full bio lockdown mode, and then others who have like plastic gloves on.
Yeah, that's the most incredible visual. I wish we had photos, honestly, of it, because when you have the government officials displaying the lack of standards that the Trump administration is so infamous for in this visual way, and then you have CDC people actually taking the necessary precautions because they have knowledge of this kind of situation, and there's precedent for it, and there's a way to deal with things in a competent manner, which again, the Trump administration is completely ignorant of. Yeah, that's just such an unbelievable image, and unsurprising that the whistleblower felt that it was necessary to take it to the press.
You know, and I really do hope, there's a lot of reasons to believe that it's not gonna happen, but I really do hope that in the end, even just from a sense of self-preservation, that Trump and Pence and the others will eventually defer to the actual doctors, the actual experts. I mean, unfortunately, they are presiding over a political and philosophical movement that despises the very concept of expertise or learning, higher education. And that's why another bit of news from the past 24 hours, all communications now about the coronavirus have to go through Mike Pence's office, specifically Stephen Miller's wife. So those inconvenient comments by doctors at the CDC about the likelihood that coronavirus will spread at some point to different parts of America, those bits of information which a doctor delivered because they thought it was going to be true, you're not going to have access to that unless Mike Pence and Donald Trump approve of it.
Why would you feel it necessary to make sure there's a filtration system for science that could save people's lives, except for the fact that you want to propagandize the scientific information to make it sound better for your own political purposes, because as we are gonna talk about later, the Dow is incredibly low. The US stock market is in free fall in large part due to the coronavirus. And this is a lot of what Donald Trump's re-election narrative and popularity is hinging on, that the economy is doing great and everyone's super prosperous. More on how the stock market isn't even a good indicator of the economy at another time. But the fact that this very important information, pertinent information for everyone's lives, has to go through a propaganda filter at the very worst, but the worst case scenario is most likely in this instance. It's super disturbing. That means lives are put after
control of the narrative.
Control of the narrative on Trump's priority list.
Yeah, exactly. And look, it might be a different, I wouldn't feel comfortable with it, but it would be a different thing if, let's say, doctor with the CDC talks to NBC News and says something that turns out it's inaccurate, it's not true, and there is a panic. Like if they'd spread actual misinformation, and because of the possibility that could lead to people doing things that are unfortunate, they decide to lock it down. That might hypothetically be one thing if there was an actual public health or public interest in routing the information through Mike Pence's office. But if that's the case, it hasn't been presented to us. And I would ask, if you're a conservative watching this, we went through a similar sort of situation with the possibility that a disease, and even a far more deadly disease, could spread to the United States when Ebola was a big thing in 2014. How would you have felt if all communications had to go through Joe Biden? And CDC doctor wanted to give information and had started to talk, but was clamped down on and now couldn't talk. How would Rush Limbaugh have talked about that? How would Tucker Carlson, Sean Hannity, what would their newscasts have been like that night if Barack Obama was like, no, everybody shut up, okay? You can submit a message to Joe Biden, and if he deems it okay, he'll then spread it.
And Joe Biden doesn't have a history of legislating in his particular state, not in Delaware, but with Mike Pence, of making horrific decisions for their constituents' health and spreading HIV, which is also a disease that's quite easily spreadable. And he is now in control of this deadly disease that we know way less about than when HIV was spreading in Indiana.
Yeah, and so because we've been talking about Pence, I do want to jump just ahead to give you a little bit of an update on this, and it actually does involve Rush Limbaugh. Vice President Mike Pence, who's leading the administration's response on the coronavirus, told radio host Rush Limbaugh on Friday that we're initiating a full-scale investigation into the whistleblowers' allegations. We'll get to the bottom of it. We want all the facts. Well, they're on it, so I'm sure we're good now. And I also love that the coordinator for the coronavirus response is spending his time talking with Rush Limbaugh. That's what a guy who's been spreading conspiracy theories about coronavirus for literally weeks now.
Yeah, when I go get my flu shot, I'm gonna consult that long-haired doctor that goes on Alex Jones all the time and said he's from MIT, but actually never got a degree from MIT. I thought you were the John Oliver Bob.
I was just gonna say, I think they've mocked that guy on John Oliver, but it's been a long time.
Yeah.
So I wasn't actually sure. So look, we've got the whistleblower account. I mean, this is one of the things that makes me feel at least somewhat comfortable is we have public servants. It seems to be, it's vague, it's anonymous. It seems to be a woman who's been working in public health for decades. We have people in our country who are not simply going to follow orders and are not simply going to keep quiet when they see not just something that's wrong or something that's unethical, but literally something that could cost people's lives, that they are actually coming out and letting us know about, and that's good. This news about Mike Pence clamping down on all the communications though, I mean, what has my criticism been for a couple of weeks now? It is, coronavirus is not Donald Trump's fault, but he is responsible for what he says and what he does. And he has been spreading misinformation from the very beginning. And we're not gonna show too much from his chopper talk today, but he was asked about coronavirus several times, and he continued to repeat 15 cases. There are 15 cases of coronavirus. He would sometimes reference others, but it's wormed its way into his head, and his head can only hold one thought at any given time. He keeps saying 15. There are not 15 infections of coronavirus. There are at the very least 60 that are known, close to 70. And despite that, Today, he's still spreading misinformation. So the CDC can't say anything. Anyone working in other areas of public health for the federal government, state governments, perhaps, if you're with California, can you say something if you're working there? I honestly don't know. So we have to trust the administration, and the administration up to and including today is actively lying about what's going on. With that said, why don't we turn to what they're saying about the press? That's where we come into this, I guess.
That's awesome.
I've noticed over the past few days a talking point that is spreading on the right, both in right-wing media and also elected Republicans, that the fear you might be feeling about coronavirus is not based in fact. It is the desire of the media to make you go mad because they think that will hurt Donald Trump in the election. So we've got a number of examples of this. We're gonna go first to Mick Mulvaney.
The reason you're saying so much attention to it today is that they think this is going to be what brings down the president. That's what this is all about. Really, what I might do today, calm the markets, is tell people to turn their televisions off for 24 hours.
Okay, so that is, well, I was gonna say that's not just some right-wing whack job. I guess it's not just a right-wing whack job. He's also the acting chief of staff, but he was there in front of a crowd saying the media wants you to be scared, not so that you won't expose yourself to danger, you'll take the threat seriously, but specifically just to hurt Donald Trump.
Yes, a right-wing whack job who has a lot of power. Isn't that so great?
Yeah.
The new reality that we're living in, people talking as if they're Rush Limbaugh, as if they're Alex Jones, but being one of the most, powerful 20 people in the country. It's lovely. Has the ear of Donald Trump on a daily basis and just completely feeds him sycophantic garbage. I love this timeline.
And if you like that, you might like this. That wasn't the only thing Mick Mulvaney had to say. Here he is talking about the actual threat posed by coronavirus.
Is it real? It absolutely is real. There's no question about it. But you saw the president the other day. The flu is real. At any particular time, 20 million people in this country are going to have the flu. The flu kills people, it does. This is not Ebola. It looks like this disease is someplace between 1% and 2% fatal. Is that serious? It absolutely is. There's no question about it, okay? But it's not a death sentence. It's not the same as the Ebola crisis. Right. But this is something we deal with. This is something we know how to deal with. That's why we sit there and watch the markets and there's this huge panic. I'm like, why isn't there this panic every single year over flu? Are you going to see some schools shut down? Probably. May you see impacts on public transportation? Sure, but we do this. We know how to handle this.
I don't even know where to begin. That is wrong in so many ways.
It's not a death sentence. Okay, yeah, until we find out a way to actually treat it. We have a way to treat the flu. I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but there are ways to treat the flu. This is spreading at a rapid rate and we still have not found.
Well, you think the flu shot's medicine? Oh, I see.
I know, I'd rather take my gorilla hair supplements or whatever those right-wing whack jobs on the internet.
Yeah, but so you referenced that it's not a death sentence. I love that he went very smoothly from, what does it kill, 1% to 2%? It's not a death sentence, except presumably for those 1% to 2%, which represent thousands of people that have already died. And by the way, these loose associations with the flu, the only good to come out of all of this is that maybe people will take the flu more seriously, because I don't think most people knew how many people die every year just from the seasonal flu in the United States alone. There are a lot of differences, as Emma rightly pointed out. We understand the flu, we have treatments, we have shots you can take beforehand. We do actually have something we can do about the flu. We don't really have that for the coronavirus, and we don't necessarily know when we're gonna get it. That's a pretty big difference. The flu, I read, kills about 0.1%, it might even be less than that. That's a big difference between that and 2%, and it's not 2%, it's 2% overall. But when you talk about older people, it shoots up in the highest age demographic, it is 15%. That is, I mean, look, if I told you could do something, there's 50% chance you're gonna die, you might consider that a death sentence. I think rightfully so.
I might.
And here's the thing, I understand, everybody wants to stop people from getting unnecessarily panicked. But talking to that crowd about a disease we don't have a vaccine for and we don't necessarily know how to treat, at least to stop people. We have people who have been taken in with the disease, there's doctors there and they die. To say that's not a death sentence, it's the flu. How irresponsible. A chief of staff of the White House to tell people, it's all gonna be fine, you'll get it. It's like the cold, it's like the flu, what's the difference? And he's echoing, by the way, what Trump said. Trump, in an official press conference, said it's like the flu. It's worse in some ways, it's better in other ways. What way is it better?
How is it better? That is such a great point by you. And I also just wanted to point out, Fox News, they've got to be bummed that this is the narrative coming from the White House, because they don't get to fearmonger and blow things up more than they normally would. I mean, this is something that people should actually be fearful about, but Fox loves to say, oh, black people, Muslim people, those are the things that you should be afraid of, when their dear leader, Donald Trump, is misleading people about what they truly should be afraid of and truly should be taking precautions against. But because the coronavirus isn't wearing a hoodie and isn't a black teenager, I guess this isn't the kind of stuff you want to devote to your airwaves and make people afraid that perhaps the government does not have your best interests at heart here, because it's run by right-wing sociopaths who would rather see the Dow skyrocket up than care about thousands of people in this country potentially dying from a disease that we do not understand.
And my heart does go out to the hosts and producers at Fox News. They're between a rock and a hard place, where they would love to fearmonger about foreign diseases creeping in. Now we have to lock down the border, but the more they do that, the more they confirm that the media taking this seriously are probably doing the right thing. So it's really a hard choice. I don't know how you come out on that.
A catch-22.
It is, exactly.
What's it, 19?
COVID-19, yeah. It's a catch-19.
I shouldn't start my jokes before knowing where they're going.
You know what, it was a laudable goal. Aim for the stars. Let's go to, we had their chief of staff. Here, Rush Limbaugh, the guy that Mike Pence goes and talks with. Here he is talking about the disease.
This coronavirus thing, I want to try to put this in perspective for you. It looks like the coronavirus being weaponized as yet another element to bring down Donald Trump. Right now, the media is reporting on the coronavirus as they hope it evolves. They hope for hurricanes on the first day of hurricane season. They hope for Hurricane Katrina, so they can say climate change, anything to advance the leftist agenda. Now, the leftist agenda includes getting rid of Trump. They would love for the coronavirus to be this deadly strain that wipes everybody out, so they can blame Trump for it. Don't doubt me on that.
Okay, so this is not the last time you're gonna hear, again, not just some whack job. He was visited by the guy coordinating the coronavirus response. He just said, the media, the Dems, they want mass numbers of people to die because it will hurt Donald Trump. That's, I mean, I know that we live in crazy times. I don't know what we're supposed to say to that. Like
Are the Democrats bringing the coronavirus over the border with the refugees that we want to have a good life?
Well, he effectively said something similar to that during the Ebola crisis. He said Obama.
Yeah, exactly.
Is that what you're alluding to?
Well, kind of, yeah.
Okay, yeah. He said that Obama wants Ebola to kill people in the United States as revenge for slavery. That's what Medal of Freedom recipient Rush Limbaugh said. So yeah, now we want people to die. Who exactly? Like the libs. We're trying to get people to be cautioned against this, to be prepared for this. All the right-wing media personalities are going out there and doing broadcasts every day telling people, you shouldn't worry about this at all. It's not an actual concern. Don't worry about it. They're blowing it out of proportion. Trump today during Chopper Talk was asked, do you think all of this coverage is a hoax? And he said, well, yes, CNN is a disreputable organization. Like, yes.
What does CNN have to do with anything?
They're spreading coronavirus. So really, who is encouraging deaths? The person who says, hey, take this seriously, take precautions, or the people who say, you're being hoaxed by fake news CNN, don't worry about it, it's basically the flu?
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to say you should trademark Chopper Talk, but that was kind of.
Oh no, I didn't come up with that. Oh, that's all over the place. But thank you, that is very nice of you.
Too much credit.
It might have been Colbert first. Anyway,
okay.
So that was Rush Limbaugh, but we also have Pete Hegseth. One of the reasons I want to go to him is, you might recall, he was like this far from being the head of the VA, almost chosen by Trump, and here he is again talking about the media and coronavirus.
I don't want to say this. It's not, I don't relish the reality, but you start to feel, you really do, watch the Democrats, watch the media, you start to feel like they're rooting for coronavirus to spread. And I don't say that flippantly. I really don't. But they're rooting for it to grow. They're rooting for the problem to get worse. They're rooting for mysteries, unknown cases, quarantines, towns, for it to become an absolute national crisis for one reason and one reason alone. They have yet to find a reason to try to drag down the presidency of Donald Trump. Even though it is not the fault of Donald Trump, they will try to pin it to him like his Katrina moment and make it political. And so a headline like this lays bare their intentions because we know it already. They just won't say it. So I think it's important to say it because we know it's in the backs of the minds of a lot of Democrats.
So what happens is Donald Trump can give whatever response he wants to give to coronavirus. And that's really what he's saying. He should have immunity from whatever decisions he makes in that response because the Democrats are just gonna criticize him no matter what. Like he's having a terrible response. We're freaked out. And then and they're criticizing, no, we want you to help prevent this further. We're freaked out by the coronavirus. The left and the rest of the country, Trump, do something about this. And because of that criticism, we are the ones that want people to die, people to die from coronavirus.
And look, as I referenced on the damage report earlier today, I will remind you that Pete Hegseth is the guy who said on Fox News that he hasn't washed his hands in 10 years. So maybe learn about that before you start talking about us encouraging the spread of germs. Yeah, and look, like he's an influential guy. Like he has the ear of the president, and the thing is that it shouldn't be that shocking that he's saying this sort of thing because Trump and his family are also encouraging the same sort of rhetoric. Here is the son of the president.
Are you surprised the way they've been handling the coronavirus situation, meaning Democrats?
Not at all. I mean, we've seen, like you said, we've seen this play out for 4 years. Anything that they can use to try to hurt Trump, they will. Anything he does in a positive sense, like you heard from the reporter that was just suspended from ABC, they will not give him credit for. The playbook is old at this point. But for them to try to take a pandemic and seemingly hope that it comes here and kills millions of people so that they could end Donald Trump's streak of winning is a new level of sickness.
He went on to accuse the New York Times of either being infected with Trump derangement syndrome or coronavirus.
I accuse him of bad beard syndrome and bad beard virus.
It's actually spreading on the right these days. But anyway, there he was more clear. Pete Hegseth said, we in the media want lots of people to die. Don Jr. said, we want millions to die. We want to rule over the ashes effectively. I think that really does come through, that plot in Bernie Sanders, all of his speeches about how everyone should have health insurance and access to health care. Yeah, we definitely want people to die. Oh, can I mention one thing? So this is Pete Hegseth's point about the media is hoping for Trump's Katrina moment. And here's the thing, I remember Katrina. You know what was so damaging to Bush about Katrina? Not that the storm happened. That is not why people turned on George W. Bush. It was the incompetent handling of it. It was allowing people to die when it wasn't necessary because they didn't take it seriously and they didn't prioritize the lives of the people that live there. And so when he flew over and looked down occasionally and when he heck of a job brownied, that was not taking it seriously. That's why it was bad for him. So Trump, again, I will say this for the millionth time, is not responsible for coronavirus being transmitted to humans. He's not even responsible for it making its way into America. But if he locks down information, if he spreads disinformation, if he sends people off to deal with these people without the proper training or equipment, if he makes it materially more likely that people die as a result of coronavirus, it very much is his Katrina moment. Because that is his anti-science, ignorant, I don't want to swear, approach to the world that is endangering lives, the same as George W. Bush. Katrina couldn't have been stopped, the storm. The deaths could have been stopped. That was the problem, and we're seeing it potentially in real time.
I don't have anything to add to your commentary there. It's quite good.
Thank you, I try. Yeah. It's ridiculous, and it's all over the place, spread all over Fox News today.
Right.
Okay, we are gonna take our first break. We're gonna check in, perhaps joined by Jayar Jackson, but we'll see you in just.
We need to talk about a relatively new show called the Republic, or UNFTR. As a Young Turks fan, you already know that the government, the media, and corporations are constantly peddling lies that serve the interests of the rich and powerful. But now there's a podcast dedicated to unraveling those lies, debunking the conventional wisdom. In each episode of On the Republic, or UNFTR, the host delves into a different historical episode or topic that's generally misunderstood or purposely obfuscated by the so-called powers that be, featuring in-depth research, razor-sharp commentary, and just the right amount of vulgarity. The UNFTR podcast takes a sledgehammer to what you thought you knew about some of the nation's most sacred historical cows. But don't just take my word for it. The New York Times described UNFTR as consistently compelling and educational, aiming to challenge conventional wisdom and upend the historical narratives that were taught in school. For as the great philosopher Yoda once put it, you must unlearn what you have learned. And that's true whether you're in Jedi training or you're uprooting and exposing all the propaganda and disinformation you've been fed over the course of your lifetime. So search for UNFTR in your podcast app today and get ready to get informed, angered, and entertained all at the same time.
Hello and welcome back to the center of fear itself, the Young Turks.
Yes, fear-mongering Turks.
Yeah, we're just talking about going to big, crowded events and how excited we are to do that.
I can't wait. I can't wait to be on a plane on Sunday.
That's true.
Should I wear a mask? I'm too embarrassed.
Supposedly that doesn't actually help to stop you from getting it. It can help to not spread it.
Did you like how I asked you a question but already had the answer?
You already had the answer. You weren't interested. Okay, I feel like Cenk is back. Anyway, so I did want to let you know that we will be talking about him as well as many other candidates on our Super Tuesday coverage. Yes, we will be doing South Carolina on Saturday, but also I hear Tuesday is pretty big. And so Cenk and Anna, Ida, and myself will be doing live coverage. There's gonna be other people as well. We're gonna have a progressive extravaganza with a rotating panel of hosts. We also expect Ben Mankiewicz, don't count your chickens, Francesca and Emma's gonna be joining from Sanders HQ itself. Is he gonna be there?
I didn't know we were revealing that.
I don't know, it's written on the paper.
Okay, fine.
John will read anything you write on the paper.
He should be there, he should be there.
Yeah?
He should be there. I mean, that's why I booked my flight and paid for a hotel.
Really fast, I know that I'm gonna get yelled at in a second, but what if he gets like 350 California delegates?
Stop, you just said 300 earlier today, and now you're saying 350.
What if he gets 500, they aren't 500, like what if it's inevitable and you're there when you see on his face the sense of inevitability?
That would be great. I feel like you want to switch jobs because you're always upset that I'm at things that you can't be at.
You are, and you get to hang out for full days with really cool politicians that I don't get to. I won't be specific. But anyway, a lot of you did send in messages about the coronavirus stories. And I also did appreciate Brenna Corn in the member comments saying John and Emma are powerful enough to be a power panel by themselves. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
And Gabby said, this is what happens when the people in charge demonize expertise. Oh, and there was one comment I definitely wanted to read. Oh yes, so the math magician sent in at hashtag TYT Live tweeted, coronavirus is now going to spread through the country like wildfire because Trump was afraid of scaring the markets where his friends are stealing left and right. This is what I've feared about Trump since he was inaugurated, an actual crisis that at best he'll screw up. I mean, we don't know, and we could get through in the same way that we did with Ebola. Hopefully we have really well-trained medical professionals that hopefully people will listen to, and so that is the goal. I just want to be clear in case any Fox News people are watching, that's the goal, not for millions of Americans to die, you ghouls. Anyway, with that, why don't we jump back in the news?
Yes, let's do it.
Okay. Mike Bloomberg is sitting on a number of past comments and actions during his time as mayor of New York that are absolutely horrendous and deserve scrutiny, particularly as he's rising in the polls in numerous states. One hasn't been talked about much to this point, and that is his active encouraging of the widespread long-term spying in New York City on a number of different individual Muslims as well as Muslim communities and groups in the years after 9/11. And so he was finally asked about that during an interview with NPR. We've got a few little excerpts from that. Here's the first.
You said later the surveillance was justified in order to keep the country safe, but there have been independent reviews since that showed not a single arrest was made.
Well, that's
good.
Could
be attributed to this surveillance.
Okay, but number one, remember, you're talking about right after 9/11 when everybody was petrified about another terrorist attack. We were super careful to always obey the law. Number one, it's the right thing to do, and number two, you knew people would be looking at it. We had just lost 3,000 people at 9/11. Of course we're supposed to do that.
Okay, so the moral argument that he's making is reprehensible. The legal reference he makes to everybody says it was okay is 100% not correct, as we're gonna get to. But that clip reminded me so much of his approach to stop and frisk that, you do what you gotta do. And yeah, we never found anything. It was a horribly inefficient, terrible program, but it didn't affect me or anyone I know, so who cares why you're getting so worked up about it?
Yeah, and he didn't even just keep the investigations in New York City, in the 5 boroughs. He did it in the tri-state area, which is New Jersey, New York, Connecticut. That is a huge scope of investigative reach that a mayor should not have. Once again, he is testing the limits, or in fact, exceeding them very much so. As a mayor, of the powers of as mayor, he did it all the time as well under stop and frisk. The boundaries of the law don't mean much to him. And when you said the phrase, you do what you got to do, it reminded me also of his presidential run. He will pour as much money as he needs to into how many states. He's going to do what he feels he needs to get done to get the result that he wants, which is to buy the presidency. He doesn't really care about testing the limits of what is acceptable, what is moral, what is legal when he was the mayor of New York City. And this Muslim surveillance, which was over 250 mosques, schools, community centers, just regular people trying to live their lives. He didn't really care. We're just gonna do that just to give the appearance of safety. And I would love if someone, from back in the day just said, well, the Japanese, they attacked us at Pearl Harbor. We did what we had to do. We interned all of them, What was I gonna do? What was I gonna do? That's his argument. So you're just gonna do away with civil liberties, people's rights as human beings just because of fear. That's emotional leadership.
Yeah.
That's not rational, decent leadership.
Yeah, and the comparisons to stop and frisk are really robust. I'm scared, the targets aren't me, who cares, honestly? And all your sense of rights, whether it's privacy rights or, honestly, the rights to your life to not be slammed up against.
Not even sense of rights. It's like the most founding principled rights,
yeah, those are
country.
Gone if he feels nervous.
Pretty sure it's in the top 5 amendments. All of these things that he violated as mayor.
Yeah, it's one of my favorites. Okay, so that statement that you saw, as well as the rest of his interview, was responded to by the director of the ACLU's National Security Project, Hina Shamsi, who said, "This is an insulting attempt to rewrite the history of an unconstitutional surveillance program that left Muslims, particularly in communities of color, devastated. It took brave Muslims and their supporters to go to court before the NYPD finally agreed to reforms to safeguard communities in New York and beyond. And no court ever said that the NYPD's discriminatory surveillance program under Bloomberg was lawful." And so just a reminder, right there, he said, everybody said it was fine. In the same way that when asked recently about stop and frisk, he says, it kind of got out of hand, but when we realized that, we cut it by 90%, as if he was concerned about whether it was legal or constitutional, and as if he had actually instituted that he had been the one to stop it. It wasn't true with stop and frisk. He's wrong about the legality supposedly being demonstrated. Really fast, let me run through a couple of bits of info about the surveillance. In 2011, the AP published a series of articles outlining the gathering of intelligence by the NYPD on over 250 mosques, student groups, and more. The department collaborated with the CIA to deploy undercover agents, as well as placed informants in mosques and kept tabs on just about everybody. NPR reported that an undercover police officer once accompanied a group of Muslim college students on a whitewater rafting trip. I actually remember TYT covering that years and years ago. As Emma alluded to, in 2007, they actually targeted Muslims in Newark, New Jersey, without the authorization from Cory Booker, who was inconveniently the city's mayor at the time. But he can be ignored. We can just go in because we're nervous again. Now, thankfully, in 2018, Hassan versus City of New York, a lawsuit filed by civil rights organization Muslim Advocates, reached a landmark settlement. The first ever case brought forth by Muslims who were surveilled under the NYPD's programming. The settlement required that the NYPD stop all suspicionless surveillance activities on the basis of religion or ethnicity. And by the way, the settlements came after the AP won a Pulitzer Prize for that reporting we talked about. At the time of that investigation, the NYPD was still denying that the spying program existed, and at that point had existed for years and years. But to hear Bloomberg tell it, it was totally fine. Everyone loved it. It was never wrong. Why would we hide it? We knew it was right to do, and we knew people would be checking. We didn't lie about it for years and years and years and years until we were finally forced by a court to stop.
Talk about another parallel to stop and frisk.
Exactly.
He was forced by a court in 2015 to stop and frisk, and what do you know? Now he's saying, oh, I did away with stop and frisk, 95% of them after, just by my own volition. A judge made you. Yeah. Same thing we're looking at here, even though he's defending it even less here. What do you mean? He's defending he's not defending stop and frisk anymore, but he's just being like, yeah, we kind of had to do this because Muslims have no power in this country, and all of the media really treats them with just a despicable amount of contempt. But also when we're talking about settlements, it reminded me, I don't know if we've talked about it on the show, Bloomberg fought the Central Park Five for years and years from getting settlements from the city for being wrongfully imprisoned for that horrific crime that they were imprisoned for.
Yeah.
So we're talking about parallels with Trump.
That's a pretty strong one.
Pretty strong one.
Yeah.
Bloomberg made sure that even though these 5 boys, their lives were destroyed, years and years taken from them, trauma inflicted upon them, wrongfully convicted, their entire childhoods gone. Bloomberg fought them nickel and dimed them to make sure they were unable to get settlements that they deserved.
Yeah.
And now he doesn't really care about money. He's not fiscally conservative with his own money because he's spending and trying to buy this election. But when it came to doing the right thing in New York and actually helping out these kids, now adults, no, he wasn't gonna do that either.
Yeah. Before we end, I wanna say a couple of my fears related to this story. One is that I fear that even if this is being discussed, if thankfully NPR asked about it, maybe a question will be asked at a debate, but probably not, because the American people, even in the best of times, don't really care about their privacy rights. They don't expect any right to privacy, and in particular, if the surveillance is on the Muslim community, for a lot of Americans, that is not going to be a priority. Bloomberg may be the worst in this area potentially, but a lot of Americans are perfectly happy to go along with demonizing that community. I mean, we saw that for years and years, probably up until and including today. And I will say, when you look at his approach to this, stop and frisk, his comments about the NSA, of course they should be reading all of your emails. I don't think that maybe Trump, but other than Trump, we've never experienced a politician as openly disrespectful towards any sense that you have rights from intrusions in your life, being spied on, all of that. The idea that he might expand federal power in that area, he's salivating for it. As Emma alluded to, he didn't feel constrained by the requirements, like the power that he had as mayor. He went beyond that. If he was president, any sense that you have any rights would be utterly gone. The CIA, it would be everywhere. And I think that he has a track record, unlike any other politician, to cause those fears. With that, why don't we take a break? Because I see Jayar Jackson waiting in the wings. He's gonna be joining us after this.
At TYT, we frequently talk about all the ways that big tech companies are taking control of our online lives, constantly monitoring us and storing and selling our data. But that doesn't mean we have to let them. It's possible to stay anonymous online and hide your data from the prying eyes of big tech. And one of the best ways is with ExpressVPN. ExpressVPN hides your IP address, making your activity more difficult to trace and sell to advertisers. ExpressVPN also encrypts 100% of your network data to protect you from eavesdroppers and cyber criminals. And it's also easy to install. A single mouse click protects all your devices. But listen guys, this is important. ExpressVPN is rated #1 by CNET and Wired magazine. So take back control of your life online and secure your data with a top VPN solution available, ExpressVPN. And if you go to expressvpn.com/TYT, you can get 3 extra months for free with this exclusive link just for TYT fans. That's expressvpn.com/TYT. Check it out today. We hope you're enjoying this free clip from the Young Turks. If you want to get the whole show and more exclusive content while supporting independent media, become a member at tyt.com/join today. In the meantime, enjoy this free segment.
Drop it. Getting some respect in here. Thank you.
The same panel as the entire week.
But with JR, with 50% more JR.
I paid John off to make sure he held off on the power panel drop it until I got it here.
Give me $1.
That's
well
all it takes.
spent.
All it takes for you.
I'll Venmo you the last 25 cents.
Thank you. Very glad to have you here. And I'm not the only one. Jenks Cat Kiki Cat said in the members' comments, "Want to give a big thank you to Emma, JR, and John. The news this week was troubling, and you still made me laugh. Great job from all three of you."
Thank you.
Thank you, Kiki Cat. That's very nice of you. Millennial Hero said JR's BTS or Bitsy is my favorite Bitsy. That's nice as well. Oh, so we'll play a little quick game. Is this a pop culture reference that JR will get? I'm guessing yes, and it comes from a super chat by Sandor the Burninator, who said Bernie winning California is like the Thanos snap. It is inevitable.
Yeah,
Do you know
absolutely.
You know what the Thanos snap is?
Avengers, yeah.
Okay,
Although
good,
I have
okay,
still
I'll
had
a chance.
Everyone knows the Thanos snap.
Everyone knows what Game of Thrones is, and he doesn't know
Not
that.
Not the same. The Thanos snap, like Marvel is so ubiquitous.
Can I ask you a question? Do you know who Worf is?
No.
See, I'm right to wonder.
If that's something about the very last Avengers, I haven't seen the last one.
I don't know what Worf is.
Last I saw was Thanos snap and everybody
Who's
blew away.
Worf?
Okay. Where am I? What year is it? Anyway, it's from Star Trek.
I told you I don't
Star
watch
Trek?
Star Trek.
Well, that's the biggest flaw of you.
Okay.
Sandor the Birdinator also said, thank you for all the super chats, Sandor. John has been on fire lately, 2 shows each day and going strong. Long live and prosper, mate. Thank you. Although they've joined me for many of those shows.
Yes.
And thank you, I do appreciate that. Okay, so with that, I did want to let you know there is just a little bit of time remaining to participate in the TYT Aspiration Sweepstakes. The trip and dinner, your chance to sign up for it is ending tomorrow. But you still have a chance to win just by registering at tyt.com/dinnerinla. Maybe you sneak in a few more swipes of your card, get a few more entries, and you might get flown out to LA, put up in a hotel, and then be forced to sit through eating with Jank, Anna, and myself.
Have you thought about what you're going to talk about with the winner yet? You're going to have
hopefully Worf
conversation.
I'm hoping because I can't do it with you.
We want people to want to do this.
The Thanos snap then. Okay. No, we'll have the conversation that Emma and I didn't unfortunately get time to do in the postgame, which was like the new Star Treks, the new Star Wars for you.
Yeah.
Are they a good thing?
The first 2 were great.
Hey, save it for some time. We'll have that talk, maybe on the Damage Report.
Okay.
Okay. With that though, we do have more news, so why don't we jump back into it? Back in the 2018 midterms, Brian Kemp, Republican, who had been the Secretary of State of Georgia at that point, tasked with overseeing the election that he was running in, won that election and became governor of Georgia under incredibly unfortunate circumstances. Unfortunate because of his actions, where he presided over voter purges and a variety of other measures of voter suppression. And now we're finding out that at the time, he had been emailing with some of his campaign staffers and effectively gloating about how successfully they were rigging the election in his favor. In September 2017, then Secretary of State Kemp emailed with campaign advisors about a media report discussing efforts to correct a, quote, string of problems with county officials' attempts to challenge the registration of hundreds of voters. The report concluded that, quote, the errors may have violated federal law. Was he concerned about his potential violation of federal law? He responded by congratulating his campaign team, writing, quote, good work. This story is so complex, folks will not make it all the way through it. A top campaign staffer, David Dove, agreed that the article, quote, won't help draw eyeballs.
Oh yeah, our crimes are so convoluted that people don't need to worry about it. I mean, they're in part right.
Yeah.
I mean, Kemp, like, he's gotten away with so much illegal activity, lies about voter suppression. It was ridiculous how much Stacey Abrams was the better candidate when running against him, and he was still rewarded by the people of Georgia.
This is one of those instances of we continue to see. We've seen the reality of it. We talk about smoke-filled rooms, and people don't think they exist, but we continue to see, and the veil keeps getting pulled. And we see it again. We talk about voter suppression, but that's totally fake. We don't need any Voter Rights Act. We can strip that because who cares? It doesn't happen anymore. Remember that argument? We're talking about we don't need this Voter Rights Act anymore because everyone's following the rules, and we're just going to let them go ahead and self-police themselves. That doesn't make any sense. But we do hear about voter fraud all the time from conservatives. Voter fraud, voter fraud. Hey, you voted fraud. Hey, they're voting for a dead person. Hey, they don't live in that district. Hey, they're doing that. But the people who consistently get caught with the voter fraud many times are conservatives and also get caught with voter suppression. So if you push enough voter fraud, you can do more voter suppression. It's just a matter of messaging. Democrats need to, after this type of thing, it came forward and the email went out. If I said, good job, thanks for the voter suppression. And this voter, and the fact that we're doing it isn't gonna catch many eyeballs. That should be said every time there's an election. I don't care if it's 10, 12 years from now. Because guess what they've been saying for decades? Voter fraud, voter fraud, voter fraud, Democrats voter fraud, Democrats voter fraud. It doesn't have to be true, it just has to be said a million times. So how about we say the truth a million times? Hey, voter suppression, voter suppression, voter suppression, voter suppression. Conservatives, voter suppression. Republicans, voter suppression. Say it in every ad, say it every time you get on MSNBC, say it every time you go on Fox, say it every time you have a town hall. Voter suppression, voter suppression. And eventually people are gonna go, oh my God, I'm so tired of hearing about conservatives and their voter suppression. But it's in their head now, and it's all they can think about. It's just a matter of saying it because it's true.
Well, that would require the Democrats to be decent at messaging, and also the fact that voter fraud is a disinformation campaign that compels people to come out. Voter suppression can also make people feel defeated and like the system doesn't work for them. So it's a more complex messaging battle than the voter fraud one, which is a conspiracy theory that just allows for disinformation to spread like a virus.
Yeah, and look, for a long time, I've wanted the Democrats to run in a sustained way against the Republican war on democracy in the form of voter suppression, as well as with Trump, a very individual desire for foreign interference. The issue is that it is harder for the Democrats to position themselves as the moral superiors in this area when they're gleefully talking about the possibility of taking the nomination away from the guy with the most votes. So at some point, you need to decide, what do you actually believe? A lot of people are trying to say, well, Bernie said this and Bernie says this now. I think that they're wildly misstating his position. But regardless, what do you actually believe? Because if Democrats in positions of power across the country are saying when it's convenient we'll overthrow an election, they don't then have any position to stand in when they criticize the Republicans for doing the same thing. And when the future of our democracy is at stake, there can't be any ambiguity. And we can't have a case where one party is determined to kill it and the other sometimes is kind of interested in it and sometimes not. We need an actual defender, and right now it doesn't look to a lot of Americans like we have that. Now, their comments in the emails actually got a little bit worse, a little bit more jokey, so let's move on. In October 2017, after purging more than 500,000 voters from rolls, Mr. Kemp and Mr. Dove emailed on their personal accounts mocking a press release from a Democratic candidate, I believe that's a reference to Stacey Abrams, warning that Georgia, quote, is systematically deleting voters who have done nothing wrong, and that Georgia is trying to make it harder to vote. Mr. Dove forwarded the press release to Mr. Kemp, writing, us, with laughing emojis. Mr. Kemp replied, us, with a smiling emoji, which is like, cute if you do it with your spouse about some little bit of news, not if it's you and your campaign manager conspiring to like effectively rig an election against the community.
So what do you do? What do you do now? Like the evidence is right there. Emails have been exposed. And will something happen now? Will there be some kind of motion or some way to oust or keep their feet to the fire from what they've done? No, there's no follow-up. I'm gonna go back as far as 08 when Obama came in, officially 09. And then we're not gonna look backwards, we're gonna look forwards. We're gonna look forwards, not backwards. No matter how much illegality, no matter how much subversion of American democracy they continue to do, it just doesn't matter. They wanna move on because we're worried that the voters don't wanna deal with that anymore. We keep shedding the responsibility for what we need to do to protect our democracy. And then now we find ourselves wrapped up in a situation where it doesn't look very secure. We go, oh man, this is gonna be the hardest election ever to fight to win, even though we have the majority of people on our side. No, they don't need the majority of people on their side. They're cheating, and if you actually say cheating, Fox News might say, oh, here we go again. Stop being concerned about what they're going to say and say the reality. You have proof. It's not even like you're speculating. And when someone challenges you, be like, here, check this out. Let them read it for themselves. When you have the truth on your side, you shouldn't have any reason to be afraid of telling it.
And for them to be held to account, they would have to be prosecuted, and the officials in the state of Georgia would have to take up that case. Yeah. Those officials are likely all conservative Republicans, perhaps appointed by Kemp himself. Highly doubt that that's going to happen.
Yeah, and one of the issues, even if they did that they would run up against is most of this stuff is legal in America. You can shut down polling places in predominantly black areas. You can remove voting booths and flood white areas with tons of booths so there's no waiting list. You can set up the match system that obviously in a discriminatory fashion eliminates generally non-white people at a far higher rate than white individuals. You can do all this stuff. You can purge the voter rolls. You can do that, and it's totally legal. And you know why? Because when the Democrats had an opportunity under Obama with a supermajority to pass legislation to protect democracy, they chose not to. Like, I guess they had a priority. I feel like you could have gotten a couple things done during that time. But if we win in November, we have got to do it all. Like, bare minimum, voter holiday, so that working Americans can go without worrying about losing their jobs or losing pay, having to choose between participating in American democracy and making enough money to feed their kids. Protections against like gerrymandering, voter purges, all of that stuff. Like eliminating the voter ID laws. Like the federal government has to step in because state governments, generally run but not universally run by Republicans, are violating Americans' democratic rights on a daily basis, and it goes back till basically as long as we've been a country.
It's got to be something you mentioned even when it's not brought up. Again, and ask other conservatives, ask other Republicans, hey, what do you think about what Kemp did in Georgia? Hey, what do you think about Dove did in Georgia? Ask them next year and be like, man, you're still talking about this? Yes, because I'm still upset about our democracy still being at risk. And if you care about it, if people will challenge you, ask them why they don't care about America. Call them un-American. Like the pressure needs to start shifting. And I'm tired of it always being on the folks who actually have the facts on their side. So you can go, well, I have everything right in front of me, but I'm afraid to say it. It's maddening.
Yeah. We do have one more bit of news that I'd like to get to before this. We've got some polls. We haven't been talking too much about polls here, but there was a pretty big one.
Okay.
And you know what? It's a Friday.
I'm excited.
Do we have a little bit of fun?
A little bit.
So let's move on to this last story.
A little bit.
A set of new polls have come out today with good information for a few different candidates. It tends to be good for a particular one, but even Joe Biden over there has got some good news. So why don't we run through a few of these and we see what we can learn about South Carolina, but perhaps far more importantly, Super Tuesday. How are things shaping up for a day that is going to determine a ton of the delegates needed to become the nominee? So in Texas right now, new polls shows that Bernie Sanders holds 29% support among likely primary voters. Joe Biden is at 20%. Mike Bloomberg at 18 and Senator Elizabeth Warren at 15. So right now in Texas, the second largest in terms of delegates, Bernie Sanders has a 9-point lead.
Oh, buddy.
Is that the excitement?
Oh, maybe.
For which state? All of them?
In general, specifically here for Texas. By the way, to put it in perspective and see if we can get another oh baby. Sanders is up 14 points, Bloomberg up 13 in that same poll since it was done in December. Since then, Biden has dropped 15 points in Texas and Warren has stayed roughly even.
So for the first part of that, I got a woohoo. The second part of
But it's up 13 from what? You know, think about when it started.
5.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, still really exciting.
So look, that's Texas, but far larger even is California. In California, Bernie Sanders in this new poll is at 35%. Elizabeth Warren is at 14%. Biden at 13, Bloomberg at 12. That is a big gap between Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. More than 20 points in a state that holds more than 400 delegates.
So this will show whoever really has the motivation, because John knows how I feel about polls.
You're excited by them? Ooh, buddy?
Yeah. So if you're a Biden supporter, if you're a Bloomberg supporter, if you're a Warren supporter, and you're in, say, California, it looks like it's insurmountable, do you just not come out now?
Yes. Like, no, but that's.
So everyone should participate.
No, everyone. No, but I just mean we had this discussion really on the show the other day. Like, this does affect people. People feel deflated if the candidate that they prefer is not doing well. I don't think complacency is as big of a factor when you see these polls as is the general malaise that comes with a candidate that is losing support in the state that you've been, say, organizing in or really supportive of that candidate in. But when I say organizing, Bernie Sanders has the best organizing team in the entire country, in the entire field. And that's the reason he's winning, because people have spread the word, knocked on doors, and he's put his money that he's raised not into private jets, not into Ritz-Carlton hotels, which articles said Biden had spent an inordinate amount of money on. No, he put it back into organizing, and it's paying dividends.
Yeah. And I will say, just to jump in, some good news for Biden. I saw a couple of polls that came out today for South Carolina where he had a big advantage. So that was what he was gambling to have. It is possible that that gamble will pay off, at least in the short term, in South Carolina this weekend. I'm gonna jump ahead to the graph though, because this one poll has Bernie up in California by 21 points. It is possible that that is an outlier, but I do wanna let you know that this other poll has him up by, I think that's 17 points at that point. And so we are seeing this trend where, I mean, he has been shooting up over the past few months. So just bear that in mind. And it's not just in these two states. Now, Texas plus California, that is 600 plus delegates. You need 1,991. So that's a big percentage there. In Massachusetts, there's a new WBUR poll, shows Bernie Sanders is at 25%. Elizabeth Warren at 17, down 8 points in her home territory. And that means it is not guaranteed, but it is possible that Elizabeth Warren will go through this process without placing first in any contest, including her own.
I think that's likely. I think that's more likely than it is not at this point, despite the fact that at one point she had surpassed Biden as the front runner for what seemed like a decade ago. But look, this is what happens when you bring on the wrong people to your campaign and you start just deviating from your initial strategy towards a unity strategy. No, you keep hitting your same messaging instead of whatever she's doing now.
Yeah, I wonder what it is, like where her support normally was in Massachusetts, how popular she was there then, because again, it's a home state thing.
And if it is about the policy, not that good there, which is, yeah.
Just even from the beginning, it probably could have already been a little bit shaky in the first place. And then also, when you get the approach of wanting to pull back and then not continue with the things that got you where you were, it could be a problem. And also, I mean, East Coast there, Vermont's right there. It's like, it's kind of the same area. I get it's a different state.
But the Massachusetts, like, you guys know the California Democratic political machine, the New York political machine, they're both really big and almost like sub-countries in their own, like the way the Democratic Party behaves there. Massachusetts has a very similar kind of hierarchy owned system there. It's a big state and a big operation.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and so one last thing I want to say, especially because as I said, I was looking at the South Carolina polls today and I saw that Elizabeth Warren there in the most recent one I saw is at either 6 or at 8%. And I'm just gonna say that a lot of people have been rightfully saying the first two contests were incredibly, overwhelmingly, shockingly white. Nevada, less so, but not a significant percentage of the population is African American. This is the first state where a huge part of the Democratic Party finally is a part. And so there's been all this pressure on Bernie Sanders. Will he perform there? And according to polls, he is doing much better in that community. But that same rule applies to everyone else. And Elizabeth Warren, her supporter base is very, very white, and she's not doing well in South Carolina. So if we're gonna have that standard for Bernie Sanders, and we should, because that community cannot be taken for granted in this election, we have to have it for the other candidates as well. And so if she's gonna do poorly in South Carolina, if looking ahead, she's doing good in California, admittedly, but bad in her own state and a lot of these other ones, really, what is she hanging around for? What miracle is going to happen that's going to radically change things? And so I will appeal to the senator as someone who does not oppose you as much as a lot of other people have grown to over the past few months. I'm like semi joking, but I'm keeping it real. You can drop out and endorse Bernie Sanders, and your chance of becoming president, I'm going to keep it real, does not change if you do that, because the number is 0. But you can salvage your reputation by helping Bernie Sanders avoid the horror of a contested convention. And here's the thing, I know what a lot of people are thinking. Yeah, she definitely doesn't think that she's gonna get the plurality, but she's sticking around to be chosen at a contested convention. I could be wrong, and I often am, but I think that's madness. Because if the Democratic Party pulls the trigger on stealing the nomination away from Bernie Sanders, why would they hand it to Elizabeth Warren? They like her better than Bernie, but not nearly as much as Joe Biden or Pete Buttigieg or Amy Klobuchar or Chris Coons or Sherrod Brown or Mike Bloomberg or any number of other people. And Elizabeth Warren at some point has to understand that. The strategy doesn't make any sense electorally and even in terms of her convention strategy. They're not going to hand it to her.
Well, at this point, maybe, again, if she really believes that, which I don't think anyone should at this point, but Super Tuesday is one of those things that makes that realization come to mind. And also, hey, you have to also show how strong of a candidate you were. Maybe say you're looking for a vice president, a nomination or a head nod for that.
Yeah.
You want to show that you're a strong enough candidate and didn't just drop out. I mean, I don't know the circumstances behind Kamala's early drop. But I was thinking at first, I was like, oh, she wants to make sure she's not in it too long and still has this potential to not fight with other candidates to the degree that she maybe gets picked up for this position as a running mate. But it's almost so early that you forgot how that Kamala was in it in the first place, right? And then so maybe Elizabeth Warren is playing that other game. And again, I doubt that that's the thought process. Like, oh, okay, this is over. I don't think any campaign goes to that degree until they're actually about to step aside. But maybe that is a positive for her to go ahead and wait for a minute, a little longer, see what happens on Super Tuesday, and then become more of a viable running mate than you could be now. I don't know.
Maybe she'll do well in California.
She's gonna blow up. These polls mean nothing. She's gonna win all.
No, I mean,
states.
I think
anything's possible.
She could maybe stop the bleeding if she leaves out, if she drops out after Super Tuesday and endorses. We'll see.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. Okay, we're gonna take a break. When we come back, second hour led by one Emma Vigeland. After this.
Thanks for listening to the full episode of the Young Turks. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, Cenk Uygur, and I'll see you soon.